Many occultists boast of big libraries and the wisdom collected from the books, but they never dare to touch the strings of the most perfect instrument given them by the Creator, and from which the sublimest symphonies and the real music of Pythagorean spheres could be drawn out. The human body is that instrument, and the human soul is the musician, as well as the composer and the creator of the instrument. The mystical training influences our spiritual life, the mere moments devoted to that lofty training having a tremendous, although unobserved, effect on the growth of our soul, which, misunderstood by us, hides itself in the depths of ourself. Who knows what the soul is like? Who knows it? Who can converse with it? It is not necessary for us to be cheated by hypnotic or somnambulistic demonstrations, or by the so-called appearances of the spirits of dead people through mediums. All these appearances refer to the lower principles of the human entity. The human soul is far above them, and he within whom the soul is resuscitated is quite unlike the mortal individual. I mentioned the mystic's end is to know God while alive. This means that it is possible to attain immortality in the material body. He who has succeeded in knowing God when alive becomes a God himself, and it depends upon him to change his mortal body into immortal by spiritual forces. The Bible shows us two such cases where two biblical personages were brought while alive by God to heaven. There was Enoch walking with God until he became invisible, i.e., until he disappeared together with his body. The other case was that of the prophet Elias, who ascended alive to heaven in a fiery chariot. Any reborn mystic will rather be glad to leave the mortal frame, to live in the immortal life, in spiritual realms. If necessary, he can always enter the material plane in any human body whatever, staying here as long as he likes. In India, there are many examples of immortality attained by yogis even nowadays. It is quite obvious that those initiates do not find it necessary to convince a Western ignoramus of it. From the above, it is obvious that the mystic needs the highest piety, as without it the tremendous longing for God is not possible. But on the other hand, there is no need for any religion. By that I intend to say that it is not necessary to be a member of a particular religious system. We can be real and actual mystics without it. But best is to keep to that religious form which we have been brought up in. According to Ramakrishna, the Buddhist has to go the Buddhistic, the Brahmin, the Christian way, etc. It is absurd and unreasonable to think that the Buddhist or the Indian way would be better than the Christian. The ideas of God inculcated in childhood have left in everybody unerasable traces, absorbed by our soul. These ideas have germinated, grown, and sometimes flourished, and borne fruit. And then all of a sudden we try to inoculate in this spiritual tree of religious ideas quite other forms, rather strange ones for which another soil, another bringing up, and another sap were necessary. He who fears to become a prey to mediumship or black magic, both are quite foolish ideas and suppositions, as it can never happen through the concentration training, but only when using magical mirrors, or when preparing oneself for the excursion to the astral plane, or by invoking tattvic powers by tantra vowels, has in a word not the faith wanted by the mystic, and he shall never be able to carry on any practice whatever. In short, such a one is not sure of himself. He who has attained God, or is on that way, will gradually get all these powers additionally, It has not been said in vain, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. As the theosophical and the anthroposophical ways of today are identical with magic, they first lead to the attainment of powers, provided the student has succeeded in obtaining the highest possible moral purity. Otherwise he would be exposed to great dangers on the astral plane. Therein lies the difference between the mystic and the modern theosophy, which, however, is not understood by the theosophists. On the other hand, the Middle Age theosophy, or the divine wisdom, is identical with the modern mystic. Its representatives were the Rosicrucians, and in olden times the Gnostics. He who, like a child, though he be not pure, is longing for God and sets out on the way to him by the practice I am going to describe, he shall soon alter his former life, or at least renounce his chief vices. It will take place provided the student considers the mystic his principal aim in his lifetime, and never discontinues the practice. But this alteration will not occur on its own, but of the divine will. The divinity will put in his way insurmountable obstacles when the student is about to commit his old faults and sins. In a word, he will be led and warned, and so obtain purification in a slow but sure manner. Many hundreds of such cases are known to me from the lives of students who are personal friends of mine. Besides, the purification as prescribed by the Indian yogas cannot be carried through in Europe, for this purification not only refers to deeds, but also to ideas and our thinking principle, and the circumstances which we are living in, especially since the war, are mentally poisoning, and those who pretend living as the yogas prescribe are either hypocrites or deceiving themselves. An exception occurs in those living in solitude or living in monasteries. It is quite natural that the progress of a mystic is faster the purer his life is, but to reach that effect, preceding dispositions of karma are necessary, and therefore this cannot be applied to all students. But yet there is another touchstone to discern all untrue occultists by, and especially those pretending to lead a pure life or boasting of having attained to a high degree on the occult path. It would suffice if they would explain mysteries. Of course, not those described in books, but such as are experienced by the mystic student when he has attained a certain degree of the inner evolution. Every student, I repeat, every, who treads the mystical way a longer time will unveil the lesser and the greater mysteries, but only for himself, and will never disclose them to profane people. Of course, the students among themselves can discourse of their revelations and do so. Those unveiled mysteries which have never been published or publicly revealed are the true proofs of the mystical way to its students. He who knows them is a mystic and has obtained them by his inner life, which he has awakened within himself. The mysteries must be personally experienced and are not phantasmagoria or mere mental states, as profane people often presume. They are a reality and identical with all students. As it has been already stated, the student never knows just what is to be expected, and therefore any autosuggestion is excluded. Besides, owing to the nature of these experiences, an autosuggestion could not be possible at all. These experiences repeating themselves innumerable times in different ways will show the student the correctness of the mystical way. In this work, it is not my task to explain the theories leading to the mystical practice. He who has within himself the feeling to look for the truth, for the light and the divinity, is referred to the works of Koenig or Bo Yin Ra in the Old and New Testaments to bring his soul into harmony and the right mood. Afterwards he shall commence with a candid heart and with devotion to the divine will, with the practice described in later chapters. The mystic is not a game and dare not be profaned by the curious, who would but learn its depths to boast of and ridicule it. He who sets out with such a resolution will attain nothing, though it will not do him any harm. The mystic is not like magic or the other occult ways, unmercifully punishing those who set out from mere curiosity or for the attainment of supernatural powers. These supernatural powers are first acquired by the occultist and are the most poisonous plants and serpents on his way, and as soon as he is nearing the summit, they will draw him to the precipice. While the mystical way is a quite different one. He who started with an insincere heart will not endure the inner pressure very long and will soon give it up. All the same, it will not hurt him, as the slightest longing for the union with God will someday bear fruit and cannot harm anybody. Just as the child cannot be harmed when longing for its father. My aim is to show forth the practical side of the mystic, especially of the Christian, the evolution of which has been influenced for thousands of years by the different religious forms, maybe even those from the Atlanteans, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, then from the Greek and Roman mystics up to the mystic of the Greek church, influenced by the Kabbalah, the Indian lore, from the so-called Gnostics up to the Roman Catholic. From all these sources, the modern Christian mystic is derived, of which the file leader remains J.B. Kerning. The mystical schools exist in many secret societies, of which we cannot take notice here, as it would lead too far from our purpose. It will suffice to say that in the ideal sense of the word, a mystical school was formed by Jesus Christ with his apostles and disciples. The mystical teaching was propounded in Egypt, then in the philosophical schools of Greece and the Roman Empire, as in those of the Neoplatonists, and in many orders of the Middle Ages. The Hebrews possessed mystical or prophetical schools. Among people who have devoted their lives to spiritual evolution is always to be found one who has attained to such a degree of inner perception and development of mind that he is eligible as a teacher of all those who are ready for it. It is necessary to point out that the teacher cannot accept every student, as there are certain spiritual laws under which both the teacher and the disciple must be in the same spiritual sphere, i.e. in the same divine ray. There are 7 rays according to the Eastern lore. The teachers or the leaders of the lower degrees are supposed to be occasionally allowed to accept disciples of a different sphere, but first the spiritual connection is to be attained, which of course is unnecessary if both are of the same sphere. The attainment of such a connection is a great sacrifice. In all mystic and occult schools, it is stated that any disciple having attained a certain degree of inner evolution will find his leader. By the latter is meant to develop mystic in the human body who has attained that degree of spiritual development which enables him to lead others on the right and safe way. In the mystical and occult books, leaders are also mentioned not living on the material plane, but inhabiting higher realms and descending to us from time to time, materializing to be seen by the outward eye, and leading their wards. There is a further mention of the highest leader, i.e. the divine spark or the divine self, latent within all men. Each mystical school has its own form according to the sphere to which its leader and students belong. Their purpose, however, is always the same, namely the so-called enlightenment, preceded by the mystical death and the rebirth. But these are subjects I'm going to discuss in the following chapters. He who through his longing has reached to that degree, where he commences involuntarily to act on the higher planes, is somehow broadcasting his spiritual waves in the neighborhood of the leaders, and then it always happens that the student who has patiently waited long years for one leader, or has commenced the right practice without one, is called on by several at one time. It is of great importance to point out this circumstance, for in that moment, the student has moved the spiritual world and drawn near to himself leaders of all kinds. Now it is up to him to select. There comes a leader of the pure mystical school, one of the occult, another of the magic, and it may also happen of the black magic. Whoever they may be, it is certain that there always come at least 2 leaders offering the student their services. Usually one is from above and the other from below, and it is up to the student to decide the right one. As the question of the leader is one of the greatest importance, And the neophytes of the mystic and the occult lores do not know, in spite of all book reading, how to secure a leader. I think it will be of use to show my own experience how to find one, or better, how to act to have him come, for we cannot force a leader to accept us as his disciples, should we even be personally acquainted with him and know him to be capable of the mystical guidance. The leader must have the inner word, i.e. he must hear his inward master's voice, who infallibly tells him whom he may accept or not for his disciple. As soon as the disciple has started, he must devote his attention to a multitude of things, of which he did not take notice before, or but a slight one. There are, in the first place, dreams, showing the first understanding between our outward self and our divine leader. As I have already stated, the Holy Ghost endeavors to get in touch with us, but the grossness of our senses and of our feeling do not heed that delicate influence, permitting it to escape. As soon as we increase our attention to the inner self, the acting of the Spirit will be revealed to us in different ways, the first of which are dreams, which are of the utmost importance. Therefore the disciple has to write down each of them, although they might appear insignificant. It concerns everybody setting foot on the mystical way without a leader, as dreams are the heralds of spiritual evolution. Though they ever speak in symbols, he who seriously longs for their interpretation may be assured of meeting an initiate who will explain their meaning. There is no doubt whatever that all individuals of similar mental desires are connected with each other by invisible ties, which will bring them together sooner or later. It is further necessary to mention here the outward life of the disciple, as prescribed by leaders such as Kerning and others. Any asceticism or celibacy is quite superfluous. Neither vegetarianism nor anti-alcoholism are necessary, though on the other hand they do not prevent the mystical evolution. Of course, it is better to live without either alcoholism or smoking. The vegetarian diet forms an exception. With some persons, it weakens the body, while the mystic must in the first place be healthy. The only vices the leaders warn against are excessive alcoholism, magic, and furious anger. When even an advanced mystic commits one of these sins, they thrust him back for a long time, and then he can regain his former degree only with great effort. As far as religious conviction and the religious form are concerned, they are not necessary at all in the beginning, provided the disciple fully trusts his leader and possesses sufficient spiritual power to carry out the practice prescribed. Any uncertainty will not last very long. As soon, sometimes after a fortnight or 1 month, the disciple will become convinced of going the right way. The divinity possesses innumerable means of showing the mystic its action, even after the slightest mystical effort, and will convince the mystic of it visibly and palpably. Of course, as soon as the student has received such a proof, his faith becomes a live one, having got incontestable, though subjective, proofs. These experiences are not only the same with each student, but also their order of succession is identical with all. Therein lie the tremendous power and force of the conviction. Though that which the student experiences is described in the rituals of all hermetic brotherhoods and societies, yet no one knows how such phenomena appear to the individual. No one will find the description of such mystical stages in any book or elsewhere, while to those who know them, their description in the holy scripts of all nations, as well as in the mysteries and in the secret rituals, are quite clear. Not known to the student, their autosuggestion becomes impossible, but after having experienced them and communicated with his more progressed comrades, he gets the conviction of going the right way, owing to the fact that these experiences are innumerable and not imaginable to anyone who has not had them himself. Their very conformity is a great proof and a hearty incitement towards eager perseverance. Meditation and concentration. meditation is only a preliminary training and does not directly lead to any mystical results. It is but the preparation of the soul to devote itself to the necessary concentration. We can meditate at any work which does not need the concentration of our thoughts. Anyone pondering over mystical or occult matters, over the divinity, religion, the problem of humanity, its future, its evolution, and the immortality of the human soul, and after-death states, is carrying out meditation. I do not mean to say that it is not of any utility. On the contrary, too many such meditations are the necessaries of life, but they must not be identified with the mystical meditations, the form of which I will endeavor to explain. The purpose of the mystical meditation is to accustom our thinking principle to become concentrated. For the mystical concentration, we need to create a logical circle of thoughts, which shall bear upon the purest and highest ideals. Then we have to constrain our thinking principle to continually rotate within this cycle. By this means, dispersed and scattered thoughts may be captivated for some time and concentrated on certain conceptions, whereby it is necessary that thoughts do not leave the circle. There are, however, people who do not need this preliminary practice, as they are at once able to start the proper concentration, while others have to be prepared by meditation. There are a great many practices which are quite wrong. I know of a certain case where an improper leader advised his students to think of the exploitation of pit coal. Such an idea can originate only in an individual not having the slightest notion of the influence of such a meditation on the whole of the human organism, on its astral body, and even the soul. As already indicated, meditations may only refer to ideal or religious conceptions. Otherwise, one could concentrate oneself on a piece of coal, except of doing so on one's divine self. The most important and the one and the only mystical practice leading direct to the goal is the concentration of thought, called in Sanskrit yoga. Patanjali says in his work, the Yoga Sutra, yoga is the suppression of the transformations of the thinking principle. The thinking principle is that which thinks within ourselves. It is neither our mind, nor our soul, nor our own self, but a particular faculty of ours, arousing thoughts and conceptions within ourselves. The proof of this thinking principle not being our own self is that when thinking anything, we have the sensation that behind our thoughts there exists something else, quietly watching these thoughts of ours. And this quiet watcher is our proper self, is our soul. As soon as we stop, by any means whatever, the flood of our thoughts and succeed in controlling them for some time, we then cease to cry down the voice of our inner self, which is of a divine origin and constantly endeavors to speak to us in its whispered way. But its still voice is incessantly cried down by our thoughts and our outer perceptions, reaching us through our senses and issuing from the outward world, or our body. Therefore the mystic has to shut himself in and retire into his interior, like a tortoise into its shell. Moreover, he has to stop the current of his thoughts, for by that means only may he perceive the still voice of his higher self. When explaining the suppression of the transformations of the thinking principle, Patanjali says that our thinking principle adopts each time the shape of the perception we are just thinking of. Example, whenever we think of a horse, it adopts the shape of the horse, etc. If the next moment we look at a bottle, our thinking principle adopts the shape of this perception, i.e., of the bottle. The Indian translator of Patanjali's works remarks that it can be compared with water poured into different vessels of varying shapes. While one of the vessels is of a globular shape, another being oblong and narrow, and a third wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. Yet the water poured in always remains water, though it takes on the shape of the vessels. These are the practices and the fundamentals of the concentration practice. It is all one whether we concentrate our thoughts on a word or on a conception, which of course must be the purest possible, or whether we force our thoughts to repeat constantly one and the same sentence imparted by our leader gathered from some holy source. It is equally the same if we succeed in blotting out all thoughts whatever and all perceptions whatever, whereby our attention is concentrated on one internal focus. The last mentioned practice is the most difficult, but the quickest one, as through this practice the student succeeds in making his interior quite void. And as in physics, the void permits of being filled with something else, namely the perceptions from the man's higher self, whereby the mystical connection is immediately produced. The concentration of thoughts, be it on a sentence or a word or a letter, or the total suppression of thinking, is in the beginning so irksome a task that it can hardly be compared with any study or any philosophical meditation, or the solution of mathematical problems. The only one comparison may be made with the chess combination, where the player always has to return to the first move after losing the chain of the consecutive moves, which easily escapes his memory. Of course, this effort is not the same with all students. There are people able to concentrate themselves from the beginning, while others need several months' training for the attainment of the concentration power. It is necessary to point out that the yoga concentration of a particular faculty, which cannot be described in words and is only known to those who have attained it, but he who has acquired it can lose it nevermore. We shall know it only by its acquisition, for it is impossible to describe it to anyone not having experienced it for himself. It is similar to the explanation of what is sweet. If the questioner has never tasted anything sweet, should we explain sweetness to such a one? He would never understand it. The concentration faculty is a subjective conception which is to be experienced. In the beginning, this concentration is connected with a certain mental effort, which is quite natural, for we can control our thoughts only by will. As soon as we have practiced for a short time, we are no more aware of that effort and perceive quietude, and in particular mental silence and emptiness. With some individuals, this emptiness can be transformed into a different and quite particular feeling, although this is not of necessity. The student then loses the sensation of his body, but never his consciousness, which is of importance. The emptiness then increases, and the student gets the sensation as of being suspended over an infinite precipice. This sensation is known in the mystical literature by the term the Gnostic's abyss. I expect the reader to be aware of man's having several stages of consciousness. In the mystical concentration, our normal outward consciousness is to be removed into the interior. This is by no means a difficult or an uncommon or even a dangerous stage, but on the contrary, one known by all of us from the present life. It has often happened to everybody that when meditating over anything or when reading an exciting book, another person has entered the room and called him to dinner or so. But the reader has not heard either the other's coming nor his calling, though it may have been done repeatedly. Sometimes it is even necessary to touch such a person to awaken him in his realm of dreams, i.e. from his concentration to the normal consciousness. The soldier at the front does not hear the whistling of the bullet, nor does he feel having been wounded while attacking. It is an old fact, and can be confirmed by those who fought in war. But how can our senses, and especially the sight, the hearing, and the feeling, which function quite mechanically in reporting, without any interruption as to what happens in the outer world or in the body, be excluded from their wireless connection with the brain, namely when our thinking is firmly and inevitably concentrated on some subject? Although some learned ones explain it quite simply, yet the actual process of such a vigilance is very complicated, being inexplicable and inaccessible to modern science. It is said that our consciousness frees itself from certain nerve channels, which report our sensual perceptions to the brain, although our senses, of a surety, deliver such perceptions mechanically to the nerve centers as in the normal state. that is, to the brain and the spinal marrow, yet they do not reach our consciousness, so that we are ignorant of them. Something similar, namely, that though we are alive, our senses do not function, takes place when sleeping. Sleep is another kind of consciousness. When sleeping, we are conscious of ourselves, but being in quite a different world, we no more perceive any sensations of our body, except under certain circumstances. On the other hand, we are then receiving perceptions from another plane, namely from the astral plane, as the occult science calls it. Concentration is, so to say, a state as if balancing our consciousness on a knife's point between waking and sleeping. There are persons not able at all to become concentrated, as they fall asleep as soon as they start. This falling asleep is one of the greatest obstacles, with certain people, to the correct concentration. If it occurs, to the student it becomes very troublesome, and sometimes impossible to overcome, as he will immediately fall asleep as soon as he commences practicing, so becoming deprived of the fruits of his effort. Then there does not remain anything but to practice while walking or standing. By this means it can be avoided, provided it has been applied in time, i.e. as soon as the obstacle in question has appeared. This falling asleep always takes place with those students who practice concentration on the physical heart. The mystical books teach that the divine spark, Atma, is situated in the heart of all beings. The student, ignoring the peril threatening him by falling asleep, concentrates his thoughts on his heart, searching therein his inward leader. Why the neophyte falls asleep when concentrating himself on his heart cannot be explained here. Everything known about it relies upon presumptions which are, as is well known, quite valueless as far as transcendental matters are concerned. He who concentrates his thoughts on the mental heart, this being in the middle of the chest, does not fall asleep. But let us revert to that state wherein the mystic is, when concentrating himself in a correct way. Let us imagine that the soul is standing on the point of a knife stretched out over a precipice. On one side is the normal consciousness, and on the other side the unconsciousness of the sleeper, in other words, the astral consciousness. By the concentration of our thoughts, we may so succeed that our consciousness remains inflexible, like a quiet flame, protected from the wind, on the said point, passing neither to the state of the normal, nor to that of the astral consciousness. This is the seeming wonder which the mystic will sooner or later attain to, and which to common people seems an impossibility, for its result is the total suppression of thinking. As soon as the student has reached that stage, he has only to remain therein uninterruptedly for 12 seconds. The following quotation is from Swami Vivekananda's The Raja Yoga. If the mind can be fixed on one center for 12 seconds, it will be a dharana. 12 such dharanas will be a dhyana, and 12 such dhyanas will be a samadhi. Dharana means in Sanskrit concentration, and at the same time the students struggle with the obstacles which are in his way to the attainment of the concentration. Dharana means the concentration attained for at least 12 seconds, during which the thoughts are to be quietly and undisturbedly concentrated on the subject chosen. If we have attained the dharana, i.e. if we have succeeded in being concentrated on any subject for 12 seconds, we have attained the concentration power, which we cannot lose any more. But at the same time, we have attained to something else. When we have been concentrated for 12 seconds without the slightest diversion and without the slightest secondary perception, we have through it lighted the inward mystical fire. Or in other words, we have paved the way for indissoluble connection with our divine self, our inner leader forever and ever. This connection cannot be any more broken, And if we do not attain to the goal in this life, we shall start in our next life just from the point whereat we stop to go on in our task until we have obtained freedom and knowledge. By the attainment of dharana, we have also contracted an indissoluble connection with God. And the divine stamp is not only imprinted on our soul, but also on our body. This contract may be apparently infringed by the human, for there are people succumbing from time to their foibles, discontinuing after a certain time in their effort to attain rebirth or liberation, both being identical. But either they will resume their practice after some time, or will do so in their next incarnation. The mystical concentration once attained is a cosmic event, and its influence, i.e. the influence of the contact with the divinity, will endure forever and ever, and will be manifested in due course. It cannot be otherwise. He who is longing for God in a faithful and loyal way with love, attachment, and without egotism, to him will God stretch out a helpful hand. And he to whom this hand has been once stretched out shall not be any more abandoned. Therefore, he who has attained to the dharana will again be able to become concentrated, not at any chosen time, but of a surety, at certain intervals at least, in the beginning. The more he then practices, the shorter become the intervals, until finally he reaches the desired stage at each practice. In the dharana, we have not the right expression for this stage of concentration. Therefore, I am using the Sanskrit word commence to appear at once the effects of concentration, the student experiencing the mystical stages and the inner senses beginning to be aroused. To that we shall revert later on. The duration of 12 seconds, whilst the student shall concentrate his thoughts without any perceptions whatever, or without any secondary perceptions, will appear very short to everybody, and any inexperienced beginner will think to carry it out without any effort at all. But he will be deceived. Let anybody whatsoever sit down in a comfortable position, concentrating his thoughts at most on the middle of the chest, but never on the heart, and imagining there a bright shining point or a flame or a star, praying with a few words to his inner leader for help and saying, "This moment I will solely devote to my divine self," or to my leader, or to Jesus Christ dwelling within me. Then let him try to persevere in that one conception, without any faltering, without any other thoughts or conceptions for the whole 12 seconds. Everybody, I say everybody, will find that even after a few seconds his mind will be wandering to quite different matters, and suddenly he will become aware that instead of thinking of the subject chosen, he is in fact thinking of a theater, of pictures of his sweetheart, or if it be a woman, of her new clothes, etc. In short, concentration is a continuous and a wearisome struggle against our perceptions and our thoughts. For the whole of our lives they are unfettered in all of us and flow upon their own course against our will, trying so to escape our control. From the whole of our lives we allow our thoughts to wander without any control, or even without an attempt at controlling them, and then suddenly we want to subjugate them, to lasso them like the wild horses of the prairies. As soon as we start this work, a reaction is aroused in our thinking principle, so that during the practice we receive thousands of perceptions, more than we usually do. But the student has to remain quiet, refusing all secondary perceptions, as well as the transformations of the thinking principle, suppressing them by his will, and steadily returning to the perception chosen, to his divinity. For a beginner who has not yet that strong support which gives the living faith, and which will set in later, when the first results and proofs of the practice have appeared, it means indeed a Herculean labor. I have already stated that effort connected with such a practice cannot be compared with anything but the concentration of a chess champion combining long sequences of different moves in his thoughts. But by the very practice, all obstacles can be overcome, and all that is possible will be attained to, provided we carry it through with love and devotion. Nearly all men may become perfected in a measure not anticipated in any art whatsoever, provided they master 2 magical words opening all locks, destroying the mountains of obstruction, and create magnificent palaces of success. These 2 words are love and patience. Not long ago, a clock was exhibited in Prague, constructed by a convict who in civil life was a tailor. That man had worked for long years in his cell, studying books and mathematics, astronomy and mechanics. Then he took a needle and the bottom of a tin vessel, of which, by scratching it with the needle, he made a toothed wheel. And then with tremendous effort and an inconceivable patience and persevering love towards his work, he contrived out of tin, reels, twine, and paper a clock, the construction of which was based on quite a new principle, showing not only the hours and the weekdays, sunrise and sunset, as well as the changes of the moon, but also for many years to come the solar and lunar eclipses. And this was achieved by men who had never heard of nor known anything about such things, who had never read a professional work, having constructed it almost without any instruments or expedients. It is indeed an uncommon work, showing the tremendous power of the human mind if it becomes concentrated on one thing, be it material or spiritual. But it is a pity that people devote such an enormous effort to material things, i.e. to earthly and therefore fleeting matters, while they do not know how to devote, and cannot devote even 1/10 of that work and effort to that which is of value forever and ever. You will answer that people must have something material to which they shall devote their work and their love, and that the conception of God is too nebulous and too far away, and that consequently people cannot devote to it so great an effort as, e.g. to an art, or to invention, and so forth. But on the other hand, the question arises whether that tailor had anything material in his mind when he commenced to think of his clock. Was it not in the beginning a purely immaterial conception, purely a nebulous and obscure thought, which took possession of and filled his soul, forcing him to study and work, strengthening him the nearer he approached his goal, until it brought him to it? With any invention, any human creation, be it an artistic work or a scientific book or anything else, with all human works, first and foremost, the idea must be awakened. That idea is the basis and the incitement towards further activity. And if we persevere therein, we shall soon transform it into a deed, materializing the fugitive conception, and obtaining so the material result of our inner activity. Prentice Mulford, the well-known author of the practical occult work The Gift of the Spirit, says rightly that thoughts are things. For the thoughts are not imaginary, unreal conceptions, nor are they immaterial and powerless. They are real things like air, water, or electricity. The very fact that they are able to act on our body, both in a salutary or a destructive way, proves their having different functions in man and in the universe besides those which modern psychology attributes to them. According to occult science, thoughts are the seed which everybody is sowing around himself, and out of which grow, in the invisible astral realm, objects as well as live beings, with which one may also magically operate. Each of our conceptions is projected into the astral realm and remains there plastically and vividly re-impressed according to its power and the perseverance with which it has been broadcast. People engaged for long years in a certain idea are not only permeated with it through and through, but they also have been creating in the astral realm a real being, or a durable construction thereof, which according to the case may be of utility or of harmfulness to them. developed clairvoyance, and those occult students who are able to set out consciously into the astral realm see there, besides other things, these creations of human souls which have been sown there for thousands of years and are bearing their fruits here, on our material plane. Our thoughts, not only our acts, appear in our further reincarnations as the results in the material world of those astral forms. It is to be remembered that the astral world is the world of causes, and the material the world of results. He who understands how to act on the astral plane with full consciousness is a magician, although a good one, for he evokes without visible cause a material phenomena, the seed of which he has sown on the astral plane, forcing it hastily to germinate. In the ordinary case, so sown a seed will germinate only after a longer time, perhaps after thousands of years, but it will germinate infallibly. People think in two different ways, and they may be divided into two big classes accordingly. The one class thinks in words, and the other in pictures or conceptions. The last are more advanced in occult or mystical matters than the first, for they are broadcasting ready conceptions, and not only words, into the astral realm, where from the words the conceptions are yet to be created. Therefore, the influence of the second class on the astral and yet higher realms is manifestly greater. Here the proper aim of this chapter has been reached. Our thoughts, according to their contents, are broadcast either to the astral realm, as next to ours and the coarsest, or to the higher realms, as the mental, and lastly, the spiritual. The thoughts referring only to matter or to the material life, as well as those connected with base and coarse perceptions, enter the astral plane and remain there to bear fruits. A more ideal thought, as for instance, an invention of public utility, or artistic conceptions fair and good, enter the mental plane to stay there. Their fruits are always good and bring their producer profit, joy, and good luck. But the purest thought, such as contains the conception of the divinity, or its qualities, enters the spiritual sphere, where it remains for eons. Its fruit is the highest bliss, and if it be of perseverance and firmness, it may eventually bear its fruits already in this earthly life, its producer being identified with God in this or that form. God has many forms, and is also without form, and the disciple first knows him in a form and only later without any form, says the Indian mystic Ramakrishna. In whatsoever form we conceive God in our mystical practice, in the same he will appear to us at last face to face, and we shall be able to talk to him, as a brother with a brother, according to the same leader. If we then devote all of our efforts to the attainment of union with God, just as the prisoner did to his clock, and with the same energy we are broadcasting our thoughts into the spiritual sphere, causing them to bear fruits already in our earthly life, and those fruits will come in the shape of the mystical way which will be unveiled to us. On that mystical way, we shall personally learn that God is not an imaginary idea, but as real, even more real, than is any earthly being. This assertion is not a dream or anything of that kind, but is confirmed by thousands of experiences, by the utterances of many eminent mystics, and the experiences of persons personally known to me. It is quite natural that such a practice needs a certain resoluteness and faith. He who has not got either of them is not able to devote himself with the whole power of his soul to mystical concentration, and cannot attain to any results. We have to bear in mind that the high mystical aim is to be our foremost effort, which must not be displaced by anything else. Only then will our effort lead to success. The 12 seconds concentration, or the dharana, is the first real degree in the mystical evolution, and when we have attained to it, we receive proofs of our advancement, both inwardly and outwardly. More of this later, but in dharana we have not reached all. There is another degree called dhyana. In dhyana, the concentration must last 12 dharanas, i.e. for 144 seconds. And then comes to the third degree, the samadhi, or 12 dhyanas, or 1728 seconds. That is about half an hour. Even the second degree leads to high occult and mystical powers if we are concentrated on certain inner centers, as the Christian mystic calls them, planets. These planets may be transposed at our will. This transposition is beautifully described in G. Meyrang's book, The Green Face. The third degree, or samadhi, is the highest degree, as we may attain therein to the union with God. In that stage, though the mystic is in full consciousness, yet his body becomes torpid and insensible. Once, when Ramakrishna was quite alone in a temple, he fell into samadhi, and in this stage he collapsed on live coals, prepared for incense. The live coals burnt a deep hole in his foot without him knowing it, until he returned to the normal stage when his senses resumed their work. To persevere in 144 seconds' concentration is an enormous labor, though within the reach of the majority of human beings. How difficult it is to attain the samadhi, those can understand who have reached at least the first degree, the dharana. But there is no reason to despair at such obstacles. Through patience and indefatigability, all may be obtained. To illustrate the way in which the Indians regard these matters, as to the obstacles the student meets on his way, there are not only those produced by our own thinking principle revolting against the thraldom into which our will forces it, our nature as well as our surroundings, and if I may say so, the whole universe rebels against us at the beginning of our practice as though to prohibit our entrance into the mystical realm. Whosoever has started the practice will before long personally learn the truth of what I say. All our senses rebel and try to manifest themselves with an unexpected force. The dormant passions awake and endeavor to lay hold of us. But this is not all. As soon as we sit or lie down at home to begin the practice, our acquaintances come to see us, barrel organs sound, and gramophones start playing. In our vicinity, people begin to quarrel, or to laugh and sing aloud. Other obstacles of this kind disturbing us in our meditation and concentration appear regularly at the time of our practice. If then we purposely put off the hour of our training, the disturbances come simultaneously with our concentration just the same. If we choose a distant place out of doors, people come and put questions to us in a place not frequented all the year round. If there are not people, there will be animals, coming near as without fear and looking at us with curiosity. Once, on such an occasion, a squirrel came and sat down upon my foot. But all this takes place only in the beginning. As soon as we have acquired some dexterity in concentration, all that resistance of the spirit of the universe is broken down, and nothing more will disturb us. I therefore advise the student to select in the beginning an advanced hour in the night, amidst complete silence, and of course in a separate room. Even then he will observe a certain kind of disturbance, as rapping in the furniture, in the floor, in the ceiling, and on the windows, similar to the rapping phenomena of the spiritualistic circles. If we intend to devote ourselves to the practice, it is always necessary to do so in complete solitude. If we carry it out during the night, it is neither right nor of advantage if another person is sleeping in the same room. As soon as we have succeeded in concentrating our thinking principle, we cause around us in the astral a very vigorous whirl, of which we are the center. The diameter of this whirl is often of 10 to 12 yards, and no astral body whatever can enter it. During the sacred mystical concentration, no spirit, no elemental being, nor even an angel can enter that circle of ours, as they would get torn to pieces by the whirl in question. As the human soul leaves its body during sleep, it is constrained to re-enter the body owing to the whirl caused by the practice. When it re-enters the body, the latter is then awakened. It is so because of the peril threatening the soul of becoming affected by the whirl while remaining on the astral plane. How that whirl acts, we have experienced many times. When the members of our mystical school were present at a spiritualistic sitting, as soon as any mystic begins to practice at such a sitting, all phenomena are at once discontinued, be they of a material or the so-called voice kind. Of course, the student has to carry through the practice in the right way, and has to attain at least the first degree. I have promised to describe in this chapter the practice imparted to us by our mystical leader before his death, and call attention to his remark that the time being is of so great an advantage to anyone longing for the attainment of higher mystical stages that there is no need of having a leader, and that everybody may practice by himself and for a long time. As soon as the student has attained a certain stage, there will come a leader of a higher rank. The practice recommended by the said leader and carried out with good results by many of his disciples is the practice without words. In the Bhagavad Gita, the following sentence is to be repeatedly found: "If anyone think constantly of me, i.e. of God, he will verily come to me." So counsels Krishna, or Christ, in many forms to Arjuna, or the human. The above practice is to be understood as follows. We take a seat in a comfortable chair or on a sofa, whereby it is of necessity that our back be rectilinear with our neck and our head. The hands may be held either along the body or on the knees. To avoid in the beginning any distraction through outward perceptions, we shut our eyes and send up a brief prayer to the highest, deciding to devote all our being and our interior to our Lord. Then concentrating all of our attention on our interior, we therein imagine the divinity in any ideal form. The more primitive and more simple that conception is, the better it is. Some persons use to that effect a luminous triangle, others a shining flame or stars and pearls. The complicated conceptions are always more difficult. Besides, the simpler conception is better adapted to the purpose of this practice, which is to prevent the admission of other thoughts and perceptions, and to enable our minds to become identical with our inner divinity, with which we shall become merged. The conception of the luminous triangle, the stars, or the flame is only preliminary and must disappear later on, when our consciousness, ourself planted in the depths of our inner being and in God's womb, is better conscious of itself and the object of its longing, i.e. its God, and nothing else, no perception at all, no thought, though the purest, no image, though the holiest, must eclipse our thinking principle at that practice. Whatsoever appears therein has to be immediately repelled, and we have to return to God's womb to stay there inflexibly. Thus we may attain the entire evacuation of our thought. We shall suppress the transformations of our thinking principle, and before long shall attain the right concentration faculty. This practice may be carried out by anyone without any risk, and everyone will hereby reach the goal. Of course, he who has no faith has neither sufficient strength. I advise all those intending to practice the above to read several times beforehand a good translation of the Bhagavad Gita, the works of Kerning, and the very good booklet of Madame Blavatsky, The Voice in the Silence. To make the practice described easier, it is recommended to listen both spiritually and physically to our inner being, as though waiting for communication therefrom. In all practices described in this book, the student has to breathe through the nose. The mantra practices. Mantra is a Sanskrit word that means a holy verse or a song, or a magical sentence or formula, and lastly, the magical syllables or letters. In the mystic, there are two kinds of practice. The first is that without words, i.e., silent concentration, as described in the last chapter. The other, much easier, and with many more efficient, is the practice of letters, syllables, words, and sentences. This is to be carried out under the same conditions as the silent concentration, and in the beginning it will be sufficient to devote to it at least a quarter of an hour daily, but also at the same time and if possible in the same place, where one is not disturbed. If the student is in a position to practice in the open air, he should do so as often as he can, for then the practice brings quicker results. It is particularly recommended to practice on lovely days, when there is full sunlight, as we then inhale a great deal of the ethereal vital power, the so-called prana, which furthers considerably the mystical evolution. We must not forget that our bodily health is a very important factor in any mystical practice. He who is not quite healthy must try to get cured if possible by occult means, such as magnetism or the inhaling of prana, and only when he can recover neither by the said means nor the mental training of Mulford should take refuge in material remedies. Yin Ra recommends in his book The Living God a practice dealing with the repetition of a particular sentence from the Holy Scriptures or from a mystical book or the works of an eminent author, but those sentences are to be such as to influence our soul in a lofty and sublime way. Such a practice of a short sentence, or one word, is called in India japa. It was known to the ancient Egyptians, having been imparted to the neophytes. The German author Kerning, probably owing to his clairvoyance, succeeded in discovering a much simpler practice of a great efficiency, the proper one to precede the practice of sentences. Each sentence and each word consists of letters, the letters being the element of the language, and the mystic having to attain the divine word. This practice of letters, i.e., their constant repetition in thought, in all parts of the human body, is the best and most proper means for the attainment of the high purpose. Christ said, "I am Alpha and Omega." The apparent explanation of this utterance is the beginning and the end. But this is a mistake, as it signifies, "I am the whole ABC." This will appear to many very strange, but I shall prove it in the next chapter by quoting the old Gnostic scripts. The letters as the elements of the language are the simplest conceptions, and the fundamentals not only of our speech but also of our thinking. By introverting them into our body, we shall succeed in getting all our fibers to speak the language of the spirit. All our body then becomes penetrated by the new life and will be reborn. The author of the book The Rebirth, a disciple of Kerning, says, "When the man is born, he learns to stand upright, to walk, and to speak. By the outer speech, his consciousness becomes awakened. So the brain, the understanding, and the will become developed. Then just as the outward man has learnt thinking and feeling, the language of the mouth, so must the mental man learn inside himself the language of thought, or he must desire, think, and feel the language of the thoughts. As the child had first to pronounce the letters, so the inward man has to learn first to think and then to feel the letters. But as the child had first to learn how to stand and walk, so the man desiring to awaken the inner life and become independent has first to think and to feel the letters in his feet, these being his foundation. Here we have touched the very mystery of this practice, i.e. that we start with the feet. The proofs of this are known in India and have been one of the oldest traditions of occultism, namely in the tarot cards, and will be given in the next chapter. A man is connected with the higher realms not by his head, but by his feet. We know that at a natural death, a man first loses the control and feeling in his feet. The same happens when the astral body sets out for the invisible worlds, where then man first feels his feet getting torpid. Best is in the beginning to think the letters on the soles, proceeding then in time towards the toes, but always on the skin surface when we finally reach the ankles. In the ankles there is a particular mystical center. The student, when reaching that center, will experience certain phenomena, provided he has practiced thoroughly and not quickly. Until he has received the sign, he must not go on, but has to continue the practice up to the ankles. Having had certain signs, he can go on in his practice without precipitation up to the knees, these being the second mystical center, the attainment of which has already effects on the whole body. First, we should practice the vowels in the following succession: I, E, O, U, A. The very fundament of that practice is the mystical word and the divine name I-A-O, known as well to the ancient Chinese as the Gnostics. It contains the visible mystery of the flower and the fruit, namely the I being the stalk, the A the scar, and the O the ovary. Likewise are concealed therein the eternal mysteries of the sexual organs in the cosmical sense, i.e. the phallus, the vagina, and union and the creative action. In brief, IAO is the symbol of the spiritual fecundation and the spiritual rebirth later on after having obtained certain results, which we always distinctly feel. We may think on the said places consonants too. Before practicing the complete alphabet, it is advisable to divide it into 3 parts, practicing each part for about a month. Everyone who has commenced any mystical practice has got into touch with the spiritual world, though it may be unwittingly. He should not therefore presume to be forsaken, if he be without a leader. Each mystical student will meet in time either a leader or a progressed student, who may advise him as to further practice. Besides, at least progressed students receive hints as to their practice in a spiritual way. As any mantra practice ceases to be effective after a longer period, it is necessary to alternate them from time to time. As soon as the student has become aware of their inefficacy, he has to return to his original practice, which will always be of a powerful effect. So it will be possible to practice the alphabet for a few years. He who has got accustomed to that practice has to carry it on for at least half an hour daily. According to the old sources, to be quoted later, man is divided into 7 sections, to be compared with the 7 rungs of a ladder. The first rung is in the feet, and the last in the head. On these rungs, the student progresses internally. The first rung is in the ankles, the second in the knees, the third a little below the sexual organs, the fourth in the navel, the fifth in the breast, the 6th in the throat pit, and the 7th in the temples. He who has started the correct practice will soon learn that the human body is tuned like a musical instrument, containing a great octave, consisting of 7 under octaves. The division of the said ladder is somewhat different in the Indian yoga scripts, as the Indians commence their concentration practice in a certain center at the base of the spinal column, proceeding then to the other centers up to the vertex. Those centers or chakras will be fully dealt with in due place. The mystical evolution corresponds with the zodiacal, man's evolution, or Adam Kadmon's, as he is called in the Kabbalah. According to all astrological scripts, his evolution started under the zodiacal sign of the fish, which is in the zodiacal man's feet. The evolution is going on, and is at the time being in the calves, namely in the sign of the fisherman. As according to the Emerald Table, all above is like all below, it also applies to the earthly man, i.e. to the microcosmos, in whom the mystical evolution also begins in his feet. The sign of Jesus Christ was the fish. Now after a period of 2300 years shall come another Savior in the sign of the fisherman. The practice of letters is best carried out as follows. While mentally pronouncing I, we should at the same time think of our feet. Within small intervals, not exceeding a few seconds, we think the other vowels as above, i.e. E, O, U, A. But thereby we constantly think of the corresponding points in both our feet or other parts of our body according to our progress. Some people are not able to think letters in both their feet at the same time. Those are recommended in the beginning to think the letters in each foot separately, first in the left and then in the right one. All letters are to be repeated on each spot at least for a minute, whereupon we proceed to the next point. In the beginning, we may imagine the letters as being just printed or written on our feet. Later on, it will not be necessary anymore. The same applies to other letters too. First, we practice on the skin surface of our body, whereupon we shall do so inside our muscles, nerves, and bones, into the marrow of the latter. In all practices, be it the silent or the mantra practice, we must always breathe through the nose. It is of importance while practicing not to think of other things, which is achieved by not allowing our attention to leave the place of our concentration. In all mystical practices, the body is to be kept quite still. We are to be either comfortably seated or to lie on our back, the spine being rectilinear with the head. When walking, the concentration is not easy. With some students, the results have been accelerated by looking at the bare feet while practicing. Others, to avoid the transformation of their thoughts, close their eyes. All these details are at the student's will. The effect of our practice will be greater if, according to the Gnostic combination, we repeat each letter for a certain time on the same spot, e.g. I, E, O, etc. Later on, it will be advisable to practice the numbers too, namely from 1 to 10 or from 1 to 12. It is not possible to fix the time when the student shall commence the word or the sentence practices. This depends on his individual progress. The student will get the advice in time. Some students are more sensitive to vowels connected with consonants, i.e. syllables. For that purpose, the guttural consonants, such as H, K, GH, and GH, are especially recommended. They are practiced as follows. E, A, or hi, he, ki, etc., while ng must be preceded by a vowel, as ing, ong, ang. The student has to bear in mind that the practices in question aim at the attainment of God, and must not therefore be carried out frivolously. Besides, the spirit would not admit it, and the person in question would soon lose patience, meeting too many obstacles. The author of The Rebirth says on page 52, "This art of thinking letters is the elementary and original religion. It is the general law of life, without which the comprehension of God, of oneself, of the truth, of the inner life, the rebirth, and the eternal constant happiness are not attainable. Everybody should practice it from his 7th year of age. The practice itself is very easy indeed. You have but to stand straight, pronouncing the letters mentally, and projecting yourself capital S, into the feet. To do so is very easy, but to persevere therein it will be necessary to employ one's whole force. As soon as we have progressed, we must practice the letters in all parts of our body, in all muscles, bones, nerves, veins, teeth, ears, eyes, etc. In a word, the letters must penetrate all our atoms to vivify them. But I warn everyone not to hasten with the practice. In the upper parts, although striking results have been obtained, for the ordinary man it is advisable to practice the first 6 months only up to the knees. Nobody need fear being at any time without advice. The sentence and the word practices are an inheritance of the Rosicrucians, one of whom initiated the leader of our school. Other details are known only to those who are actually practicing. Each student has to experience a whole series of phenomena, these being quite analogous with everyone. The following is extracted from Kerning's The Mysteries. Are there mysteries? Yes, there are. Why are they not revealed? They cannot be revealed. Why not? For we do not seek them, but all the world seeks them. It is not true. People have neither courage nor faith. Courage is necessary, for without it, nothing can be obtained. Likewise is faith necessary, for without it, who would make any efforts? The conception of God and his qualities is the purpose of all endeavor, which both philosophy and theology have to submit to if they want to get results. The transition from man to God, from the creature to the creator, is the basis of all knowledge and of all education and all prosperity, wherefore all countries should support their investigators of the mysteries, enabling them to work in retirement free from prejudice and superstition. The shutting up of all bodily apertures by the hands and feet was a task wherein but few succeed, owing to its difficulty. To arouse the inner sight, they had a simple practice in repeating for innumerable times the word Aum. Egypt was the country of innumerable mysteries, where the investigation was rather carried out in a scientific manner. He who received the first initiation had to attain to a certain perfection in some branch of the divine science, even should he have been constrained by force. Their essential occupations were medicine, measures, astronomy, astrology, and prophecy. The last applied to the nations and individuals' fate and to the fertility of the soil. For that purpose, they applied signs, words, touchings, and bodily postures. The signs they took from the circle, dividing it into angles or quadratures. The single words passed for prayers, pronounced with shut lips into one's interior to awake the inner life and to enter the spirit. The touching they used for the arousing of the spirit in any part. By means of the position connected with the touching, the words, and the signs, they observed the graduations of the body with their spiritual action. Here Kerning means the mystical centers. Their school provided the following preparation. The student had to practice daily for a few hours, and the instruction lasted 7 years, if he would pass all the degrees. The sphere of his activity was not assigned to the student, unless he was found worthy. For the attainment of their aims, the Egyptians possessed special expedients which no other country could boast of. The colossal buildings, the remains of which even today arouse our admiration, were built for the support of their lore, their obelisks and pyramids, the tombs and the temples with their inscriptions were the signs and the letters, not of the country, but so as they are seen by the Spirit, speaking the elementary language of God. As far as signs are concerned, which the author mentions above, I may add that all who are practicing will receive the proof that the hieroglyphs, i.e. the metaphorical writing, originated in the Spirit's acting on the mystic's body. This very fact must be sufficient to show to any unprejudiced mind that the mystic is the only right way, for from the beginning God speaks there through the medium of the mystic's body. The human body is to its last cell, built up by the Spirit. In truth, the life of each cell is the manifestation of God. Therefore, the Spirit may evoke at any time on the human body as well as within it phenomena named the mystical stages, which may be perceived by other people too. Those phenomena are identical with any mystical practice, be it the silent one, or that of letters, words, or sentences, or both alternately. The phenomena appear according to the student's progress. To those phenomena also belongs a certain kind of the metaphorical writing, of letters, numbers, and whole sentences appearing on the disciple's body, and perceivable by anybody else. Of course, no disciple will show them to skeptics or laymen, while he may do so to persons seriously interested in the mystic. Nevertheless, those signs may be perceived by profane people when they have appeared on the student's body unexpectedly in the presence of others. The mentioned signs or stigmas, for that in fact they are, show the student the degree he has attained to on his way or the promise of the progress to come. They may also prescribe the practice of letters appearing. The adversaries of the mystic, they are particularly to be found among the pseudo-occultists, presume that the mystical practice first affects the senses and the soul. That is a great error, as just the contrary happens. In fact, however, the mystical practice first affects the material body, and this in a salutary way. The mystical practice fortifies the health, this having been testified to by many physicians. It further evokes remarkable transformations in the whole organism, calming the nerves, and then it gradually influences the finer parts of the man as the ethereal and the astral body. But let us revert to the signs mentioned. They appear on the body of all students in a comparatively short time, and make themselves known by a particular sensation, so calling the student's attention to the place where they have appeared on. Sometimes there are single signs, while next time there appears a whole row of them on different parts of the body. As already stated, these stigmas are the first language of the divine spirit, wherefore the student has to pay careful attention to them, entering them into his diary specially provided for that purpose. At the same time, these signs are the guides of the student on his way, and consequently, there is no risk that the student will not know how to proceed in his practice. The signs in question are not only the true origin of the hieroglyphics, but also the origin of writing itself. The primitive man who led the mystical life, being more penetrated by the spirit, in the present generation, imitated these signs, and so learned writing. But this is not all. From the symbols and the sacred sentences appearing on the student's body, and taking sometimes human and animal shapes, the man learned to imitate them, which in the olden days led to the archaic art. Likewise, the so-called tattooing with uncivilized nations has its origin in the mystical signs. Before all, the student cannot produce them at his will, or out of his imagination, for he does not know their form and cannot foresee it. For the rest, personal experience will prove it. We can attain to the truth but by personal experience, i.e. when practicing ourselves. Unless we have commenced the practice, we cannot have the slightest notion of the inner life's beauty, of which all initiates speak. The whole mystical way consists of some principal chapters, accompanied by different phenomena, the basis of which is the cross, i.e. the death on the cross. Our Savior came to show us the mystical way, and he did it more clearly than anyone before. But the way was known in the darkest antiquity, being the way of the cosmical evolution. In ancient Egypt, as well as on antique relics, which belong to nations of which we do not even know the name, we meet with the cross as the principal symbol of theirs. In Egypt have been found crosses of iron with human figures, either thereupon or beneath. This should be sufficient to anyone possessing common sense. In all ancient myths, we find the mystical way described. For an example, I have selected that of the Greek king Oedipus as being the most remarkable. The king Laos received the news that his own son would take his mother for his wife. When the queen Jocasta bore a son, the king, intending to make the oracle impossible, pierced the child's feet at the ankles, and passing a cord through, bound them together, ordering the child to then be abandoned in impassable mountains. But the child was brought up by a shepherd, who gave him the name of Oedipus because of his swollen feet. When he had grown up, he learnt the horrid oracle that he was destined to murder his father and to take his mother for his spouse. He therefore left Corinth, his home, going abroad, where one day he met his father's carriage. The carriage would not make room for him, so he went on silently and courageously till the horses made his feet bleed by their trampling on them. Thereat, the son killed the father. Then he journeyed to Thebes, where he destroyed the raging Sphinx, solving her riddles. Thus the unknown stranger Oedipus, in conformity with the proclamation that the liberator, who destroyed the Sphinx, should get the queen for his wife, married his own mother, the queen Jocasta. This myth is the key to the mystical evolution of man. King Laos, being the old man, the old Adam, is to be killed by the new man born within ourselves, i.e. Jesus Christ. And the reborn Jesus Christ takes for his wife his mother, i.e. the soul, his immaculate bride who bore him before. This myth contains the great mystery of the Immaculate Conception. It will be clear to all that the symbol of the feet pierced through the ankles corresponds with Christ's feet nailed through. Besides, there are many other mystical symbols concealed in this myth which may not be unveiled. The bleeding feet mean baptism of blood, after which follows the killing of the Sphinx, i.e. the old serpent or dragon, namely the gross worldly power or the material body. This killing will take place after the riddle has been solved. Who saw behind matter, he conquered and overcame it, and at the same time he destroyed it, as it ceased to exist for such a one anymore. Then follows the so-called mystical marriage, symbolized by the marriage of Oedipus with Jocasta. That mystical marriage is the culminating point of man's inner evolution, being the union of the king with the queen, the bridegroom being Jesus Christ, and the bride the soul. This marriage means the association of the student's soul with the Holy Spirit, whereby the mystical evolution is brought to an end, that student having become the master of the royal art. But not only is Oedipus myth a description of the mystical way all ancient tales and fables are so, I cannot show the conformity of those old tales and traditions owing to the limited space of this book.